Yeah, right.
And Michael, if there's ever a time you need to click on the PowerPoint, just give me a chance.
It's good to have friends in high places.
Yeah. So power man with the computer.
You're the man.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. So we're excited to have Dan and Emily from Saratoga Associates and Michael from Behan Planning. And so we're excited to go through the streetscape and riverfront access concepts and get your feedback. So I'll let the professionals go.
Okay, thank you, Vincent. Thank you everyone for coming here on this rainy evening. We're excited to share with you some updates and progress of where we are right now. We've got some preliminary designs to share with you. Just so give an overview of tonight, we're going to sort of give some background on how we got here, some of the background of the DRI project so that all of you are aware in case you weren't already. Then review with you some of the design concepts that we've developed, some of the issues that we've uncovered and questions that we have, because following that we're going to get into just discussing what our next steps are at this point, and then hopefully just opening it up to like an informal Q&A session with all of you to get some feedback. We'd like to just ask some questions about what you'd like to see, what you did like and didn't like. So ask everyone just be patient, hold your questions toward the end. We can get along with that. Just as an overview, the city was fortunate enough to be awarded, as you may know, the Downtown Revitalization Initiative award. Some portion of that is about $2.8 million of that will be allocated to the projects that we're discussing tonight. And those particular projects are focused entirely on making some improvements to the downtown streetscape, as well as some waterfront access improvements. And we're really sort of limited in that scope, that we have to stay within those boundaries of what can we do with the money available to make the improvements, whatever improvements that we can, the best improvements that we can for the allotted money. So the breakdown of the available funding between the two things, for the downtown streetscapes, we have about $1.3 million, which we can use toward that. And for the riverfront access projects, we have $1.6 million. Approximately $100,000 of that is allocated for administrative funding and so forth of getting this project rolling and maintaining everything. So total, we have $2.8 million available for the design and construction of some of the elements which we're going to review this evening. Now, early on when this project was first funded, the city had to do a lot of homework to request this funding. And so some of you might remember there were some public meetings early on that started to discuss with the public, well, what does our community need? And some of these were identified as priority projects. And so when the funding came in for the city, these were things that were identified as being something that we should target as part of our community outreach. And that being, they fall into two categories, as I mentioned, the downtown streetscape work and the riverfront access. So from the standpoint of the downtown streetscape, one of the things that was identified was developing an arts park here between Margaret and Durkee Street, as well as streetscape improvements on some of what were considered the priority streets of Brinkerhoff, Margaret, and Bridge Street and Durkee Street. Those being identified as priority streets. Number one, we have to address those first. There were secondary, or I guess lower priority streets that were also identified that we can try and address those if we have still funding available. And also from the standpoint of the riverfront access, we have a number of projects identified here is developing a waterfront landing, developing Mcdonough Park with some sort of improved performance space or seating and lighting enhancements, providing a riverfront overlook and promenade along parallel to Durkee along the water, and also potential for a kayak launch down. So these were some of the sort of priorities that were identified early on when the funding was made available, and as part of this agreement, we're obligated to sort of address these priorities as best as we can. Now, keeping in mind, this project that we're dealing with is only one in part of many different moving parts that are happening throughout the city. On top of the other DRI-funded projects that are happening, there's a lot of different wheels in motion here. And as you'll see, it's creating some complexities as far as coordinating efforts between different projects as well as timeline. So for example, on a rough timeline scale, we have the Saranac River Trail Phase 2 will be coming to fruition more later this year, as well as the Durkee site redevelopment, which isn't in our as part of our project, but it's something we're trying to coordinate with the Durkee site coming into fruition later this year, early next year, as well as the municipal lighting department demolition later this year into next year, as well as the testing results for the river dredging and Dock Street improvements coming in probably towards the year 2020. Then the Saranac River Trail Phase 3 in 2020. And then some of the dredging along the river here, which is going to be taking place this section here during 2020, and then up in this area in the year 2021 is projected. All of these elements have an interconnected ability in the sense with especially the riverfront, because a lot of what we want to do here along the riverfront is going to be impacted, or we have to coordinate with the river dredging. So from a scheduling standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to try and phase our construction work so that we're in tandem with that work, or it's not getting torn up as we go. So as you can see, there's a lot of different moving parts here and different projects happening all at once, which is very exciting from a city standpoint. It's just also likewise complicated. So giving us a general context of some of these elements from the riverfront access standpoint, we're looking at Mcdonough Park as improved lighting, landscaping, paths, amphitheater. The waterfront landing, you'll notice there, is highlighted in different color because that's one of the elements that we'll have to coordinate with the river dredging. The Riverfront Boardwalk at Durkee Street, as we mentioned, the Durkee Street development, we are currently working with the developers and trying to coordinate what their design plans are with our design plans so that we can work together and have a cohesive design to the whole element. And I will show you guys some of the things that we're working with them on that. The river overlook with lighting, seating, and informational plaques. A kayak launch, again, this is one of the elements that's going to be coordinated, and the timeline of that is going to have to be coordinated with the river dredging, and improvements to other walkways. With the downtown streetscapes, we have improvements on up to 5 streets for pedestrians and bicycles, protected access on the Veterans Memorial Bridge, particularly for bicycles and pedestrians, and transformation of the park between Margaret and Durkee, as I mentioned, as we're calling it, the Arts Park for the purposes of this presentation. As some of you may remember, we reached out with an online survey as well as a mailed survey to find out what sort of elements everybody would like to see in the community. This is a quick sort of snapshot of some of the early feedback that we received during those surveys. From desired streetscape improvements, many people noted that they would like to see the improvements of cafe spaces and pocket parks, the addition of plantings, benches, and bike racks, as well as art, the ability to have some wider sidewalks and potentially bike lanes in some areas. The desired streets for improvements, Bridge Street and Durkee Street, Bridge Street up to Peru at least, and Durkee Street were some of the highest priority that we received back from the survey. Also Margaret and Brinkerhoff, what we're referring to as the Arts Corridor. These also were identified as relatively high priority among the community. Some of the Arts Park improvements between Margaret and Durkee. A lot of people were unanimous in requesting shaded seating areas, some sort of performance space. However, in some of our last December meeting, I don't know if any of you attended our meeting last December when we discussed some of the options for that. Generally, there was some consensus that sort of space didn't lend itself well to any sort of large amphitheater or performance space. The idea of a water feature, playground, trees and landscaping and public art. And some additional amenities which were discussed were a splash pad and potential skating rink, as well as a whitewater park. The public feedback regarding the riverfront access, most desired along Durkee Street riverfront improvements were the addition of a walking path, connection with the Saranac River Trail, a riverfront overlook with perhaps some low bush trimming so you have a better view of the water going in, and a future whitewater park or kayak launch. And some of the Mcdonough Park improvements listed were improved seating, lighting, and furnishings, connection to the nearby pedestrian bridge, a performance amphitheater, landscaping, and also future kayak launch. So these were some of the elements that were in discussion as we entered into this later on. So we wanted to share with you some of these initial ideas that we have, starting out with the project concepts that we'll be reviewing. Under the category of streetscape funds, we have the Arts Park and improved ideas for streetscape along Durkee and Bridge, with the potential of along Margaret and other streets. And under the Riverfront Access Fund pool, we have ideas for the Riverfront Walkway, as well as future access points at Mcdonough Park and Broad Street. I say future because, as I mentioned before, we need to coordinate these with the river dredging. So at this point where we stand right now, we can develop the design for those things, but the actual construction for them would be on hold until after the river cleanup is completed. And there we go. So with the Arts Park, you see on the image on the left, this is the existing conditions of the Arts Park right now. One of the main features that would stay at least is there's currently the handicap access ramp that goes up from the top of the hill at Margaret Street down to Durkee Street. The image that you see on the right was one of our preliminary design ideas that we presented back in December. This provided some shaded lighting or shaded seating areas up at the top of the hill toward Margaret Street, sort of an upper plaza bench seating, some tiered seating coming down with an event plaza, and then a stage at the bottom of the hill with a sort of a flexible paver space at the bottom, which could be used for multi-purpose functions such as just setting up fair tents or food trucks, and therefore we would keep the existing handicap access ramp going down and have shaded seating areas and bike rack at the bottom. Since then, we've been experimenting with this design a little bit more, trying to flush it out a little bit. As I mentioned, the concept of the performance space wasn't selling as well, so we started to look at some other ideas. This was a sort of a secondary concept plan that was developed. This has a sort of a large cafe patio seating area at the top. If you look, this is Margaret Street over here on the left side, and you have Durkee Street here on the right. So at the top of the hill, with some new trees, would be a sort of a cafe patio, which is looking down over the rest of the park. The concept of a splash park here along the middle of the park. The existing ramp would stay, but it would weave around some new sculpture items which would be placed in the park, with a bike rack up at the top of the hill, another larger sculpture down at the bottom, integrating some of the existing trees and making sure we have some shade trees with a bike rack at the bottom. In reviewing these designs with the city, I had some pros and cons overall. The obvious pro is this creates a nice pedestrian connection up and down from Margaret Street down to Durkee, provides some shaded seating, cafe space, and potential for some wall murals. Some of the drawbacks to it were the splash park, as designed right here, would be caught in a little bit of the shade, and it's a little bit small and cramped for what we were trying to do. And also the splash park, as located here, wouldn't really have any dedicated parking, partially because if the splash park were to be developed here, it would largely draw a larger crowd of people, and there was concern about their availability of parking, that perhaps a splash park would go better suited at a place where we have some more dedicated parking. So following this design, we came up with a revised design here, where we formalized the cafe patio up top here with plantings all around it and some trees, sculptures significantly placed at either end here. Again, stepping down to a central water feature park here, and then stepping down again to more of a garden setting, again with highlighted places dedicated for sculpture displays and bike racks, and then stepping down again to Durkee Street, yet still maintaining the handicap accessibility along this side. We've started to advance this design a little bit further. Again, this has the positive aspects that the previous element did. The concern here is this one doesn't provide any formal play spaces without the splash park, if you will. But it also has some of the positives that were mentioned before between the cafe space and shaded seating area. And we've since started to advance this a little bit more and tighten the design up a little bit, experimenting with exactly how the grades would work and how the sculptures would be integrated. And here we have sort of a centralized area here for a very formalized sculpture as you're making your way down the street toward the river. And then to give you a better idea of what this might look like, this is sort of a perspective bird's eye rendering of what it would look like. Again, starting from up at the top, Margaret Street, there's the cafe area at the top, step down to the water feature fountain, and stepping down again to a central design feature of a sculpture with places around the perimeter for other pieces of artwork to be displayed. So this is where we are right now with this design. We feel that it would create a very strong pedestrian connection, an attractive pedestrian connection down across here and across Durkee over toward the water, which is something we'll talk to you about in a moment. And we're hoping as we get to the discussion period to get some of your input on that. From the streetscape perspective, as we get down the hill from the park, we end up here on Durkee Street. We have an additional challenge of the roadway area here on Durkee's very narrow. We have limited sidewalk on the east side right here, if you could call this really a sidewalk right now. We also have other obstacles between transformers and other large equipment that would need to be moved. Sort of adequate size on this side, but not really what we were looking for as far as being able to accommodate some real nice design elements, such as some street trees and a nice formal sidewalk. One of the things that we started to look at here was how much room do we have to do some elements here. Because of the narrow width of the right-of-way, right now we're looking at if we start to integrate some wider sidewalks here with some more attractive walking pedestrian areas and some street trees, we'd be limited to either not having any parking on the street or being able to, limiting it to diagonal parking on one side of the street. So this is something that we're still looking into. Likewise, on Bridge Street, narrow situation right here, trying to incorporate some of the desired amenities here, such as dedicated or pedestrian bike path through this area up to Peru Street. It's a little bit tight, and right now, part of our concern is a lot of this is very much in flux in trying to coordinate with the Durkee Street development and coordinating exactly how their development is going to impact or interact with our design. At this point, things are such in flux that we haven't flushed out exactly how this is going to work. So we'd like to discuss with you tonight what you would like to see here as far as the materials and design, from the concrete sidewalk versus a brick versus some of the lighting. But we don't have design elements for you to see right now because that's still in flux. However, likewise for the streetscapes on Margaret Street, here we have very wide sidewalks, some nice street trees. We have the opportunity here to potentially update some of the paving materials such as the sidewalk and bricks, as well as the discussion tonight of removing some of the parking to create cafe spaces or add bike lanes, and hearing what you would have to say regarding that. We'd like to discuss that with you in a few minutes. And as well as some of the other secondary streets, Clinton Street, Brinkerhoff, and Protection Avenue. They could all stand to see some of the improvements from some of these design elements. Clinton Street in particular, you have the mixed-use area with residence and commercial uses. It could see a benefit from some of the streetscape upgrades. The updated streetscape could encourage some new business activity in the area, and it could support existing and attract some additional businesses, which we're aware of. Whether or not there will be funds to make some of those upgrades, we will have to see at this point. A lot of it's going to depend on the level of design and level of materials that are chosen for the main corridors along Bridge Street and Durkee. On Brinkerhoff Street, we already have some great potential here with wide sidewalks. The difficulty in upgrades here is right now that the street elevation of the actual roadway is above that of the sidewalk, and that creates some great complexities with regard to grading and stormwater drainage with any streetscape work that we do there, making, unfortunately, the design costs and engineering costs of that, or construction costs rather, along that way, much more expensive than they would otherwise be. So that's something that we have to try and keep in mind here. Anything that we do here, anything major that's done on Brinkerhoff would cost quite a bit more than the other streets because of that. And on Protection Avenue, we have a narrow service alley. We're looking to potentially relocate the dumpsters, update pavements. There's installing some overhead lighting, installing murals where possible. There are some transformers that we were originally looking to wrap, if you will, to clean them up and make them look nicer. However, we've just recently learned that those transformers are going to be relocated now by others, so this will help. So the transformers will be moved, and the design for that is underway. And another element that we wanted to discuss with you in a little bit more detail, because part of the focus, our focus of tonight, is trying to get a little bit more design detail from you guys as far as what sort of materials and finishes you would like to look for, because that would help us in determining cost impacts and developing our construction documents going forward. So for example, discussing what type of lighting you would like to see ideally. For instance, you have the idea of continuing the sort of historic downtown poles, as you will, or some of the waterfront poles as one idea. Bollard lighting, overhead lighting, finding out what sort of finishes folks would like goes a long way toward being able for us to be able to figure out what sort of design level we're working with. Likewise with the sidewalk pavements. Do we want to keep sort of the same theme of the existing pavers? Would we want to go with concrete? Other colors, patterns, textures. We always love to use like more decorative brick designs in all of our streetscapes and sidewalks, especially where we have new street trees. So these are the sort of things we're looking for, what people would like to see. And as I mentioned, some of the transformers, we would be looking at wrapping them in more decorative wraps, if you will, to give them a more pleasant appearance. In some cases where we can, we're looking to relocate those because they're often in the way in places and we'd like to be able to move those on. So now moving down to the other side of the Durkee Street lot, now along the water, we have Durkee Street passing along right here. We have the Arts Park that we just discussed previously right here. And then this would be the river. So here would be the Riverfront Promenade that we've been discussing. Right now, it would connect up by the Saranac River Trail and come down Broad Street to the river connection here, and then continue along the river over toward Bridge Street, where you would have a protected and enhanced crosswalk over across the street to the park. The idea behind this is to create some shaded seating areas and places for people to go, walk along the river, stop and have some lunch, have some seating areas where people can enjoy lunch for the day, especially as perhaps some of the Durkee Street site gets renovated. Planted areas with seating, looking to sort of clear out some of the underbrush here so that you have a better look down at the water, have a better view of the water. But perhaps most importantly is creating this connection through the site right now here. Our team right now is working and coordinating with the Durkee Street developers to modify their site plan to accommodate this sort of passageway through the site here that would allow us to have a sort of continue the park-like atmosphere of the Arts Park and extend it across Durkee Street and down here, so that we have a continuous pedestrian path, protected pedestrian path down through the site to the water, and it would also protect your view of the water. So when you're standing up the hill, you have a direct line of sight down to the water, and it's not blocked by any buildings. Likewise with the streetscape elements, that is still in early discussions as far as coordination. I don't have anything particular to show you for that, but here we would be looking to coordinate this design, which has already been fairly well established with the developers, so that we would be able to coordinate the construction of this with their construction of the site. So this would be looking at starting possibly next year, 2020, coordinating with them on the construction of the Riverwalk. These are some sort of visual examples of what we're imagining for the Riverwalk right now, to give you some idea. These are sort of design elements that we've been looking at as idea generators, if you will, of being able to do some nice things in the pavement, the decorative elements in the pavement along the water, and discussing with all of you, what does a riverfront boardwalk mean to you? Would you like to see an actual wooden boardwalk, or would you like to see perhaps something a little bit more polished and finished, if you will? There are many examples. You can do many different examples with nice wood or stone or tile paving patterns that can be very decorative, very durable, low maintenance, and yet be quite attractive with planting beds and seating areas along the way. So these are some of the sort of, I guess, inspiration images we would use as far as developing that riverfront boardwalk. And then moving on to Mcdonough Park, the potential projects, as I mentioned earlier, were improving the lighting, landscaping, walkways, amphitheater, and the waterfront landing. Right now, the park has some issues with there's really not enough seating near the riverfront. You have sort of the Cobra Head style lighting in some areas of the park. Those could certainly stand to be upgraded. as part of an enhanced design. Right now, we have some concerns with, from the standpoint of flooding and ice damage, ice damming along the riverfront. We have some limitations in what we can do right along the water, in the sense that we were looking at initially putting in a amphitheater here along the water. It has since been sort of moved up away from the water in some ways and sort of buried into the grade here because of we're trying to stay away from the flood zone, which is one of the requirements that we are sort of held to on this regard. There are, in truth, some complexities with trying to accommodate this performance amphitheater in the grade here. It causes some complexities with being able to meet with do the grading correctly while still being able to have handicap accessibility and meeting all codes. So this design is a little bit challenging in that regard with trying to meet all of the requirements of that. One of the things that we've been looking at as sort of an alternative is developing some more tensile structure along the water as seen here in, where is it again?
Amsterdam.
Amsterdam, right. Just recently in a similar situation here, designed by Saratoga Associates, also having to deal with the floodplain, is the idea of a tensile structure, which would be something as a little bit less of a permanent structure in that regard, trying to deal with the issues of flooding in that way, or some sort of a temporary structure which could come and go as necessary. Other areas where we're looking at the riverfront access, we have here on the left, this is Broad Street, the river running this way. Broad Street, this is the bridge crossing the river right here. If you remember the riverfront path that follows along Durkee Street, this is the portion that connects up to the Saranac River Trail. Where it would turn, we would be proposing a new path branching off of that and going down, creating an 8-foot wide path underneath the bridge at Broad Street and connecting back up to a ramp that connects over to Waterfront Park area here on the south side of Broad Street. And this would have a dedicated concrete stairs with kayak launch. We have a platform, movable gangway, and a floating dock for access to kayaks here along the water. Again, this is something that we are moving forward with on the design of, but the construction of would have to be coordinated with the completion of the river cleanup. And likewise, over in Mcdonough Park, along the walkway along the water, if you remember, there's an area where there's some stone steps that go straight down to the water. Immediately adjacent to that is constructing this platform here. This would be a sunken platform. There's 2 ways down. This back part is a ramp that goes down and then continues around to a flat area here, much down closer to the water level, where you would have kayak storage bins. Also, you could get there directly from the stairs, and then stairs continuing down into the water there. That being something that we could construct in the floodway because of its just monolithic concrete. It would act as it would act as a flood wall if there was a flooding event. That's something that we could be able to construct there. Again, though, the construction of that would be timed with the river cleanup. So right now, the next steps, as we mentioned, we're still working to coordinate some of these design elements because a lot of them are impacted or touching with the Durkee Street development. We're trying to advance the concept designs into construction drawings as well as wherever we can. We're doing ongoing coordination with the Durkee development, as well as ongoing coordination with sort of a marketing and branding plan that we have. It's a project overall for the city. And we're hoping to bring back when we have something ready to show you as far as the streetscape. But we wanted to sort of take a moment to have sort of a pencils down moment and get your feedback on some of the elements that we've showed you tonight, particularly the Arts Park, and some of your ideas as far as some of the streetscape materials you would like to see, lighting. Anything we can't cover tonight, we're hoping to cover through posting on the website and collecting some feedback on that as soon as it's ready. I just don't know exactly when that's going to be ready at this point. So with that, I just want to now get some input from all of you guys here. I don't know if we'll probably bounce around a little bit, but I might ask we can jump to some certain slides. If you want to go back and look at like the arts park, let me know and we'll try and jump back to that slide. So in the meantime, I want to kind of open it up to any questions and so forth. Yes, sir.
So, thank you. Extremely illuminating. Greatly appreciated. Couple of specific questions. Is it possible within the funds that exist now to reserve funds for those quote-unquote future river access things like the kayak wall and the other stuff? Or is that, are you designing that now for future funding through CFA or something else?
Right now, we would be designing that now under the funds available here. The funds for construction, correct me if I'm wrong, the funds for construction of that would have to come at a later time. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. It's a great question. And because we've had the same question to the state. And what they indicated to us was, go forward with the designs. They want money to be spent. They want construction to occur, as does probably everyone here to some degree. What we want to do and what the state wants us to do is do the designs and then have those teed up as construction ready, shovel ready projects for future CFAs. What is very common on these DRIs is for the city that has been awarded the DRI to do subsequent asks for CFAs in terms of child projects to support it. And that's exactly what I think the waterfront access projects would be in this case.
And it's unfortunate just because of the timing of right now with the river cleanup, that's one element that's we have to kind of wait on.
Yeah, but that's just reality. And so that's kind of where it is. It's like, get that design in the can, get public vetting of it, and then once the money's in place, go forward.
Right. I would love to be able to stand here and say we're going to go boom, boom, boom with everything. The one thing we can move, knock on wood, the one thing we can move forward pretty quickly with, I believe, is the arts park. In fact, we'd like to get moving right away on that and try and get something moving this year, if possible. So this is going to be a little bit, let's start with what we can start with, the arts park, and as the other things, the Mcdonough Park and the street sidewalk stuff starts to fall into place, then we follow up as best as we can. So
with your planning that's happening as far as the designs are concerned, if you go back to a number of your slides, you'll see lots of public planting areas that exist already, some of the downtown area, Bridge, Margaret, as well as around Mcdonough. And generally, there's the river view. There's already benches that are physically right next to the farmers market building that face the wall of overgrowth that you can't see the river through. Right. So what I'm hearing is that these capital dollars are going to be spent on cutting some branches down and clearing some invasive species one time, or is there going to be a recommendation for a very specific plan and a budget expectation on a go-forward basis that's going to be recommended to the Common Council, so that if they do execute these river access or these river view plans, that they must follow along with those expenditures on a go-forward basis to ensure that those things
as
are...
far as a regular maintenance standpoint concerned?
Plantings in the park and, we have sculptures already that are kind of breaking apart here and there, so there's got to be maintenance associated. And it would be great if your organization would recommend to the Common Council a budget line item for the expectation of the care for these items going forward.
Yeah, once again, that's another really good question. And it's a really key observation, because we see that in every community we do these projects, because ultimately, these projects all look, everything up there look really snazzy, but who's going to keep it clean? Who's going to do the maintenance? What are the real line item operations and maintenance costs? Absolutely. And the reality of it is, we do, as a landscape architecture firm, we really try to take that into account, so it's as user friendly as possible with respect to that. However, in terms of recommendations, what is done subsequent to our leaving, we absolutely make those. And we're always accessible to make recommendations, but and once we have this left, we will have recommended, O&M procedures for that, because the last thing we want to do is have a really good site that isn't properly maintained 5 years down the road.
Yes, sir. Matt?
My question is just elaborating on what you just mentioned earlier about plans, procedures, or rules, or guidelines, or agreements on public art, anything to do with the owners of public art. Is there a committee in place to handle that, or does your organization handle that? So,
As far as choosing what sculpture would go where, we wouldn't get involved in that, and we'd like to.
No.
like a selection process, like a 10% for art on building, when you're building a structure or building a plan like this.
As part of the construction budget set aside,
No. That's once again, that's another good question. I'll give you a perfect example of what we've done just recently. In Amsterdam, there was a pedestrian bridge we designed. And now it has sculpture and various pieces, works of art on it, on the structure. We did not have anything to do with that. That was all commissioned through artists, through a committee in the city that earmarked the funds, did their CFA grants, got their arts funding grants, and commissioned it. So it was, we are going to hopefully lay a platform on which things can be built and added subsequently, but ultimately the city needs to generate the interest and help champion these efforts for public art and those sorts of things.
So the placeholders that you have now in the most recent design for the art park, that it says sculpture. I'm assuming that it sounds like you'll have a place to put a statue if indeed the community raises the funds for a statue and design and figures out what it's going to look like.
yes.
So subsequent, there'll be a platform and maybe a plug for a light or something that will be part of what is
Foundation.
built with this.
I imagine.
No,
Yes.
that's it. And that's it. And like for the project we did on the one on the bridge in Amsterdam, it was like a $15 million pedestrian bridge. However, they've done about 6 different grants subsequent to that, probably about $2.5–3 million for the pieces that they put on. But we just create we don't create the sculpture, we create a really nice spot for it.
Got it.
Yes, ma'am.
Kind of going along the lines of what this gentleman said earlier, along where the Derby Street lot is going to be developed, where you're going to be integrating the riverfront green space. There's going to be a private building, and there's going to be a wall of sorts along the river there, almost creating an alley effect. Coming from a female perspective, I would not feel comfortable walking there. Are you guys going to be addressing that kind of alley-like effect that's going to create, or working with the other company?
No, I think that's a good point. Ideally, we'd like to see some activation along there, because we were talking internally about what, besides creating a nice boardwalk area, what would attract people down here to want to come out and have lunch. And ideally, we'd like to see shops along, if not along the waterfront area, but along the alley that cuts down from the park, cuts through the site to the water, having some activation and some shops there. Emily's more familiar with, I think, what they've been trying to do there. I don't know if that's possible, but that's one of the things we'd like to see. We certainly wouldn't want, I think, a blank wall along that area.
Well, it
Because
seems
it just,
confining and
if,
almost,
yeah,
I mean, and again, coming from a female perspective, that wouldn't be somewhere I necessarily would go if it feels kind of secluded or segregated from the rest of the design.
right,
Sure.
From a safety aspect, I'm talking in that regard.
right.
Yeah, so I mean, that's great feedback for us to hear. Some of what we want to find out tonight is about design details. So that might be influenced by plantings, for example. Maybe we don't want a lot of tall shrubs because you want to be able to have good sight lines down there. What level of lighting do we want to have? And we do touch base with the developers every week just to see kind of where they're at. And it, you know, they're totally comfortable with the amount of space that we've shown so far, but we've definitely passed that note along to them. They've been very open to discussing back and forth with how our projects are gonna meet one another.
Yeah, they've been accommodating, they really have. And,
I would hope that they're smart enough that they're gonna not wanna turn their back on the water. That's why all these projects came from the fact
Yeah.
that historically, all New York State, upstate New York towns, we all turned our back on the water at some point. We started building, you know, our factories with their backs to the water and stuff.
yeah.
Now we're trying to undo all that. They're not gonna wanna have this waterfront property that doesn't like look out onto the water.
And
So-
that's, well, you said exactly what I was going to, but the one thing I would say is the main interest in terms of development on that property is that water, and it's the access to the water. And they've already indicated to us, like that walkway down from, you know, Brinkerhoff eventually that comes through, that they want that to be 40 feet wide. Good access, good sight lines, so you can get right to the waterfront overlook. And then, of course, you know, on the Riverwalk, take advantage of that. Have access in and out, shops, those sorts of things, because that's the selling point. The reason there's an interest right there is because of the Saranac River.
And we're trying to convey that importance to them, is that we're creating this feature, you guys should try and take advantage of it, because this is gonna be an enhancement to your property. So, yes, sir.
Just to piggyback off Doug's questions and the speaker to his left, about the maintenance, I think you're looking at the Department of Public Works, certainly, how much personnel would need to be added, or would it be taken away from other areas? The police department, I'm sure, will be involved, as the female speaker indicated, if there'd be more patrols needed in that area. And also, what are the expectations of most of this during the winter time? Would the boardwalk, would that be expected to be cleared for those who might want to take a walk along the icy river? With the parks, if I want to go down and look at the statue, would you have to show me a path to get to it? So beyond, and I think, and it's like anytime you do a renovation in your home or anywhere, you always like to think, well, how much maintenance, how who's gonna pick pavers over cement, you know, who's gonna pick the grass up, with the crack?
Right.
All this little stuff adds up and will be on the back, and there's no revenue being generated to kick into the city budget to maintain all this. So my question is, as Doug spoke, I don't know if there could be a separate line item for the maintenance downtown, what DRI has done, but I think as you choose any materials for, when you put a bathroom at home, you know, what's the maintenance, and can you maintain the maintenance? You know, are you ready to hire someone?
That's a good point. We try and take that into account. We'll certainly discuss that with the city. There's always a balance between, oftentimes, unfortunately, the way life works, it's like the yummiest foods are the fattening. The nicest materials aren't always the most durable, and the most durable materials aren't always the nicest. So we're trying to find that nice sweet spot in there of,
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, your points are well taken, and like I said previously, or something along those lines, that is a number one question for everyone. It's like, how do we make this stay nice? And I can tell you, you know, the communities we've worked on where we've done that significant a waterfront revitalization, there's the projections in terms of indirect revenues have been, you know, fairly modest in terms of the amount of traffic you would need, the folks coming to the new businesses, those sorts of things. And we've exceeded it every single place to cover the costs. And there's metrics you can use to determine what the traffic flow is going to be and that sort of thing. And they tend to cover them costs in the first year. Now, that being said, a lot of, like, you asked a question, is the waterfront going to be accessible? Is maintenance going to be required 12 months a year? Those are very fair questions. It depends on the use. And ultimately, that has to be determined, because we've had communities that have done both. And this is just a case in point. You know, we have some, you know, like our pedestrian bridge currently is open 8 months a year. They shut it down for 4. But those are things that have to be determined, and it might be an issue for that boardwalk, the maintenance and the upkeep and stuff, to be the responsibility of the occupants of Durkee, or something along those lines, because that's going to be an asset to them. And that's something that could be discussed.
So, did you say there's several metrics that identify if you do something with the waterfront, that you increase, associated economic impact?
Yeah,
Does it
yeah.
also impact the need for parking? So will this increase the need for parking?
That's a great question, and I don't have the answer to that. Because
You have a bunch of economic impact, but you don't really know.
No, and I can't tell you that, because I'm just not well versed on that. I'm focused in terms of, the studies we do for our clients tend to be focused specifically on revenue generation and direct and indirect tax impact on the communities.
So that's all from foot traffic. right?
Absolutely.
So if you can identify the increase in foot traffic, would you be able to say that those numbers, a portion of those people came in a car?
I don't think that's unfair to say.
So there could be some way to get to a number of increased parking that might be needed if we improve the water.
Yeah, you'd have to ask ask a parking expert. I'm not the person.
Okay.
I have a quick kind of three-part question.
Three-part,
I'm not a boater, I'm not a kayaker, but I hear things about kayaks. I'm not familiar with the other riverfront properties you've developed, but obviously our river ends right about over there, it becomes Lake Champlain.
Yep.
Isn't that a very limited stretch for kayaking? I mean, even if you start at the city property area to here, it's gonna be like a few minutes, and there's also very many times in the last few years, I'm going to assume I'm probably the shortest person in the room, that it would be hard pressed for me to drown in that river. Where it's nothing but a pile of rocks, because the water level is so low, there will be no possible way for kayaks to go down there. Convinced of that, I'm not even kayaking. Like citizen piles of rocks is tall just because of our.
Though certainly at certain times of the year when the water level is low,
Yeah.
that you can clearly see that. I do know that early on in this project, we were hearing from a lot of people saying they would love to have some more kayak access. That's why we started doing. Yeah, I suppose it might be, but I mean, as soon as you get out, then you've got the whole waterway out there.
And then depending on, now I'm not familiar with whether or not kayaks go into lakes, that was the reason I said I'm not
Yeah.
experienced in boating or kayaking. I would think that they probably would want to be in the middle of Lake Champlain, but.
No, it's beautiful to go on any open body of water. I'm not a huge kayaker, but I've been a couple of times. That's much easier than on a river. Being able to get out that way and come back in, you get a little bit of a whitewater effect in here, which is fun. Some people really enjoy that. A little scary for me. But we were hearing that early on, that that was something that was requested by the community, and they like to see it. That's why we started doing included in some of our design elements.
We really, and I'm going to ask you to speak up on this, Emily. Emily's kind of our kayak person. But it's really something that we see everywhere. There's such an interest in kayaking, different types of kayaking, and a lot of it is lake-based, and a lot of it can be water-based. And as Michael indicated, there are two different types of kayakers. There's the ones that get on the white water and do it, and then there's the folks that get beat up on doing that, and then they go on the lake and they join me. But the thing is, it's like, it is so popular. These access points, we're getting asked to do it on every one of our waterfront projects.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, part of the, a side element of what we're trying to do here is trying to spur some economic activity. And if we know that people want to come here to go kayaking, and they're going to then go out and grab something
I
to
was
eat.
kind of curious.
No,
and kayak on the lake, because my only experience was as a teenager, child, being on a aluminum fishing boat in the middle of Lake Champlain.
Yeah, like a John boat,
It's pretty scary, because it can be a violent lake to the point that even the ferry will shut down.
No, but
hug the shore.
Yeah.
no, the one thing I will say though is that, like, if you look at whitewater and the interest in the folks that are in that sort of thing, it's the Black River over in the Watertown area, and it's Saranac here, and they're very distinctive in terms of what they offer. So you can get folks traveling just to navigate those, but the folks along the shores and whatnot on Lake Champlain is going to be a large number. That's why there's a couple of launch stations identified. Do you have anything to add, Emily?
I think you've covered quite a bit.
But you're our lead designer on these things.
I mean, one of the other reasons that we've been showing is because it was one of the elements that was identified through the DRI process. So our scope of work to get into the logistical side was to make sure we at least considered everything that was requested in the DRI development process. But Dan's right, we have heard it over and over again in different communities, even some where we've had to point out that, okay, you have one spot to get in, but where do you get out again? So having multiple access points is really nice, and having the opportunity to be able to start to develop that here is really great. We have some communities that only have one public access point on any waterway, but they still want a kayak launch, so.
Now, in these communities, have you found it, has there been any need for increased like lifeguards or anything, or like peak season? I mean, because right now, I mean, I'm not sure how the rest of this road is going to pan out this season, and it just seemed like, you know, we didn't borrow a flood threat, obviously. As I said, there's times that you see rocks, but then there's other times, I just lived across the street, that you can hear the rushing current depending on how much runoff there's been. That river can get pretty deep. So it's kind of extreme direction.
Yeah, I'm not sure about,
If you
you know,
increase the number of people kayaking on the river, is there going to be more
We
safety
haven't dealt with a
resources?
situation where we needed to bring in like extra lifeguards, at least not to my memory, no.
We've had some, where the sighting of the particular launch location is something that we discussed with like the local sheriff's officer, whoever patrols their waterways, just to make sure that it's a safe access point for them, should they need
They
to
have good
rescue
visibility
someone.
of it.
And good visibility and safety from that aspect, but that's been the extent that we've, needed to coordinate so far.
And we're getting a lot of folks that are just randomly going off on kayaks, and this just makes it a little more coherent and organized.
That's certainly
Plus safe.
Who have we gotten so far? Anyway? Yes.
So something I noticed while we were looking at some of the streetscapes designs, you were talking about the prime season, what about the off-prime season? Mainly to do with like, you put a bunch of pretty trees, you know, along the river, and it looks awesome in the summer, but 7 months out of the year there's sticks. So what about, you know, I don't know, I'm sure you thought of it already, but maybe more, I don't know, bushes, something that could survive during the winter that look good when everything else is dead, you know,
Yeah.
because the winter lasts a long time.
Yeah.
It just ended.
I don't think it's over yet. Yeah.
Seriously.
No, but actually, your point's really well taken, because when we, I'm sorry.
It's good for stabilizing the bank, too.
Oh, absolutely, and we like to, you know, one thing we like to do is have something of visual interest 12 months a year. And so it's not, we're gonna have, it's gonna look great, you know, it's gonna look great during magnolia season, and then everything's gone for the rest of the year. We like to have things pop, different colors, spring colors, summer colors, and fall.
Right. And likewise in the park design, we could incorporate some trees that will be there in the winter, as well as some, you know, holiday lighting, so you can light the park up at night and do sort of festive, celebratory stuff. I think that could look really nice. Throw, you know, holiday lights in a tree and suddenly becomes magical.
And frankly, you know, doing the uplighting or downlighting is one of the most cost-effective ways to change the entire look of a space.
And safety.
Yep.
Sorry, just catching up here.
No, he's.
Just, okay.
Who? Yes.
The boardwalk on the river, that's remaining on city property, or is that the developer's property? And how far does the property line go?
The boardwalk would be on city property, going from
The riverbank in is how much of the city's?
the distance in from the riverbank. I have to refer to Emily on that. She's saying, why ask?
Yeah, so
It'll depend on where the riverbank ends after the dredging.
from what I remember is that, maybe you
Yeah,
can speak to
so-
this a little bit, but it's, the pedestrian easement is kind of on the riverbank.
Yeah, we're going to place a public easement on the Riverwalk for public access. That's the plan for that area.
So would the riverwalk be built up, or is it going to be on the lake?
It's intended to be at the top of the bank at this time, so it would be,
You have to.
yeah, you could pretty much, well, not knowing what the developer's designs are, but kind of accessible at building level, as if you were to walk out the ground level of those buildings, it would be
Yes.
right at the top of the bank there. We'd like to also make sure that there's a safe connection from the Riverwalk across Bridge Street into Mcdonough Park, so we want to make
Yes.
sure we're keeping it at that, at essentially
That
street
same like
level.
at that sidewalk level.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, or? Okay. Yes.
There was a slide, a bunch of slides back, it was Derby Street, and it was commenting about car overhang and narrow streets and all that. jazz. And I guess my question would be, I think there's like this, forgive me if I'm wrong, I'm not.
No, it's fine.
There's like a 4-foot space that could, for perpendicular parked car, sidewalks here is a 4-foot space, you're supposed to like leave for a parked car not to overhang the sidewalk.
Oh, and coming in at an angle as far as the bumper
Right,
sticking
bumper
out,
overhanging
yes.
the sidewalk, right. So when it comes to narrow-ish streets and redeveloping those streets and putting in improvements like trees and pavers and all that, do the plans that you guys are developing take into effect that overhang and that?
I don't know if we've gotten into that level of detail right now. Right now, we're just doing some, trying to do basic math with the amounts of space that we have available right now, seeing what configurations will work under different property line alignments, to see what we can basically fit in. We'll have to take a harder look at it to look at that element of it as far as the overhang. I know we're regardless of whether or not a car is overhangs, we still have minimum parking lot dimensions that we're supposed to try and stay within, and then travel lane dimensions. So yes, you can pull the car up a little bit farther, but then that takes away from the sidewalk area. So I don't know if that addresses your concern, but we haven't looked at it, I think, in that level of detail right now. We're still trying to negotiate stuff with the developer.
Yeah, that location in particular from that image, the property line is kind of right through that sidewalk, the very narrow sidewalk that's shown. So what's happening on the building side, they're still working on their concepts, so we don't quite know yet. But it looks like from the preliminary ones that had been shared previously, it's mostly going to be building frontage along there, so I don't think you'll have too many conflicts of cars overhanging sidewalks. And we're hoping to have a little bit of a wider sidewalk with whatever would happen, so that we can help avoid that as well.
I just one quick question. If you look at your current design, the watercolor that you did, the bird's eye view of the Arts Park.
Yep.
Can we go back to that?
Because this is the one you want to really work on, right? This is the one.
Well, this is especially the one we think that we have the best shot right now
This is the
of
one
getting
we'll-
started right.
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
this
we're
year.
we're all ears on this. We
Yeah.
definitely want to hear what your
Right,
thoughts
so
are.
my thought on this, just mostly questions really, is it's 1.3 million is the streetscape, and this is the fund body that would, that
Yes.
this
It
would
would cover the streetscape, yes.
So, is that gonna be about 1.3 million, leaving no money left for anything else?
No, right now, this, what you're looking at here, ballpark figure is a little over $500,000.
Okay,
So we have some more money left to do other stuff.
And again, it depends on sort of something we'd love feedback on, like finishes on
Yeah.
materials.
right.
Is stone dust surfacing something you're comfortable with, or would you prefer pavers or concrete sidewalks? Again, it comes back to maintenance.
Or granite.
Stone dust is, every time it rains, you might get some
Righty.
areas you've got to fix
Right.
up.
Mhm.
Whereas concrete's a little bit longer term. It could be colored concrete, stamped, patterned, or it could be pavers. Do we want to have a lot of plantings or minimal plantings, curbing, benches, different elements of lighting, so all does can significantly impact the cost.
Yeah, so from a personal perspective, the big thing that we talk about, a number of us talk about, is maintenance. So
Mhm.
I think at the end of the day, you look around where we are right now with our existing cities planners, planters, and other
Mhm.
things, and the condition of everything, including the roads, is that we're not really very good at making things stay really nice. So
Mhm.
let's design in a way that makes sure that we can keep it looking pretty good for as long as possible. And then also so that it's winter stable.
Sure.
Because people will want to walk around in there, and if it's going to be a real big problem for the DPW to shovel it out, then it's going to have to get fences around it. And then, 5 months out of the year, you can't even walk into things.
Right.
That's a really good point, because you look at the potential for slipping hazards there. There's a myriad of them.
Absolutely.
Sorry,
That's
skip,
okay.
go back.
Yeah, about lighting, and anybody feel free to help me out. I just seem to remember it was many, many, many years ago that when and we're wondering what you see, we want input about even things such as
Yeah.
lighting. I'm thinking it would be, in my opinion, be best to do a common lighting theme throughout the entire downtown area, because it was many, many years ago when we switched over to these, phosphorus, horrendous lights that are everywhere downtown right now,
Right.
which I also have been under the impression that were extremely energy consumptive.
Okay.
Definitely not green friendly in today's world. Very
Yeah.
expensive from what I've heard to keep things going. There's gotta be some LED solutions out there that probably provide bright enough light. I mean, we're
Yeah,
using
there
LEDs
are
and
a
hard
lot of
lights.
options that for poles that look exactly like this,
Right.
but for example, have an LED fixture,
Yeah.
so.
I think there's some issues. I mean, I live downtown, but fortunately enough for me, I'm high enough up that I'm above the lights, but there are some other buildings in this area that have them right outside the living room.
The glare right in.
Yeah, and I think you can even see when you come back from Vermont area, it's kind of lights up the downtown area, but, I mean, I personally wouldn't have the information as to how much things cost around now, but I don't.
Now, if I
At least
could-
15 years people can say.
If I could ask you a question. You know, Michael touched on before what our two pockets of money are. It's the riverfront access, and we've talked about that, and it is streetscape enhancements. Now, do you have any more input in terms of lighting? You know, because lighting is really important. It can be decorative, it can be, you know, seasonal, you can have all sorts of things, and of course, it's a safety factor. I mean, what are your general comments? It's just outdated in terms of the lighting that we have, or?
I mean, I'm just going on what I've heard from the data that you put in, very non-energy efficient,
Okay.
they're extremely expensive. They are kind of just bold and bright and obnoxious in my opinion.
Yeah, there are a number of things that can be, so there's, the color temperature that you look at you, because sometimes, they'll just be like, have that blue, white glow to them, and it can be really harsh, especially if you're driving. And sometimes it doesn't always illuminate your walkway very well either. And then you can get some that are a little bit more like daylight or warmer. But I also have seen the ones that you mentioned where have that awful orange glow to them
Yeah.
too, so,
I think that's in my opinion what's.
yeah, okay.
Is there anything more, any comments folks have specifically on this?
If someone, the mayor may be interested in this, those quarters in that water feature, whose quarters are they?
That's gonna fund the future CFA project.
This would be Councilor
I think it
Moore, he
funds
could
the
go in
maintenance of the
and
maintenance.
get
Does anybody have, like, ideas, or we'll get to some of the other questions too, but ideas on the water feature, just wanna bring that up, because right now it is, that is just a placeholder,
Yeah.
as something, so, you know, is a pooled water feature like that kind of represents the direction, is it, pavement level where there are just a few jets that kind of drain to a central point, so it's less of a fountain per se and more of just sprays, or, you know, something totally different, so we're open to ideas on what that actually looks like.
If I can say, I think as an adult sitting here, I think it's nice. I think, you know, I would enjoy sitting by that. But you also get, kids, teenagers, and, you know, not attended by their adult guardian all the time coming downtown. Sometimes there's nighttime activity. I can just also see something that's very open like that becoming a hazard. So I don't know if there's a way where you could keep the beauty of something like that while addressing any safety concerns that might come up when, you know, mom or dad or big brother isn't looking.
Yeah, they can be designed so that it looks like it's a deeper pool of water, but has maybe a quarter to a half inch depth that's
I
actually
can
there.
just see people being,
Then they
having
would dive in.
drinks, like drinking a bottle in there, or, you
Yes.
know, if
Right.
there are quarters in there, some kid like jumping in to try
Someone's
to,
dog hanging out there for a while.
anything like that, you know, and
No, that can happen. One thing we have is one of our parks down downstate in Manhattan. It's flush, it's granite, and it's just got the water sprays coming out, the jets, and the kids run around, and there's no fear of, you know, like kind of what you indicated.
right,
There's
You
a
get the
depth. to it.
sound of the splashing water.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
which might be a direction to go. I mean, I'm just looking at any negative.
Oh, sure,
possible thing
absolutely.
that
That's fine.
happens.
That's what we want to. That's what we want to hear.
It's, you know, in the winter time, you might have to worry about snow and ice building up inside that, or
Exactly.
covering it over, and if
All
it's
true.
just
Winterizing.
pavement level,
Yep.
and it can drain a little better, it'll be easier to winterize.
Sorry, man. Yep.
Speaking exactly what he just said, the slide a couple before this where you had the splash pad area, I was so excited to see that. for all the kids. I mean, it's for all generations really, because it would be a water feature. And similar to what you just said, I've seen that a lot in Florida where they just have just some shoots coming through.
Yeah.
And kids are just happy with that.
Yeah.
But also because on previous meetings, after your surveys, splash pad was #1 amenity. That was, I mean, I don't know, I think on the list. So is there maybe, instead of the fountain, maybe an option of just doing like the spouts where it could be like kind of like a hybrid water feature splash area? Not
mean-
necessarily, I'm not talking like buckets of open water.
No, but that's why we're here to get,
Right.
we're absolutely here to get that feedback. Because, I mean, I know the thing that's neat that we have down in the Battery Bosque actually, is that it's also got lighting tied into it. So it really, kids can have fun on it. It's a safe environment, and then at night, it's really attractive.
I would love to see something like that. My kids would love to see.
So is that a pool? I'm just curious,
It's
is that a
just-
pool that I'm looking at? Is it like 2 feet deep or something?
It's just shown as maybe like a seat height wall, so maybe like an 18-inch high wall, but maybe at that, like maybe a foot of water maximum for
Okay.
something like that. But again, it's just a placeholder for this. We didn't really get into detailing how.
Yeah, we're just looking at, I mean, Emily's vision for it was to have some element of a water feature.
So I had an idea based on the discussion around the safety feature. Because I saw something, it's not something I thought of talking about, but it came to mind. I saw something in Seattle, the Seattle Center, in Seattle, Washington, where they had water fountains and they had like grates, like metal grates, so that kids and families can run around these metal grates, and it was just fountains coming out of these metal grates. And there was no structure, it was just flat.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Expand on my comment too, and what he's saying is that because for families that go downtown, there's lots of things, everything's for adults. There's no playground, which I'm not asking for a playground, but, I mean, that's just something to give the kids something to look forward to engage them, and, oh, okay, let's go downtown, so I'm gonna go to the splash pad, or whatever. So it's just another,
Question for audience here. One of the reasons why we were getting kind of steering away from the splash pad here was because there was a perception that there's not enough parking right here to support like an activity like that where people are gonna come bring their kids specifically for, because let's face it, that would be a hit. I know my kids love it. Like any sort of a splash pad element, either just jets or water shooting out of like metal grate sort of design thing. Do you think this area would still be able to support it without having like a dedicated parking lot for it?
I would park 2 blocks away and walk to it if I needed to.
I think the whole
Right across the
concept,
street.
the whole concept is to get people downtown, whether it's for a splash pad or something else. So
And
parking is what it is.
I suppose if you're like Les Falls bank parking, so right across the street. So
It's actually not that far away, no.
it's right across the street.
Okay, that's good.
How do people there's no bathroom, that's the other part that is a challenge for that part, and I totally agree with you on splash pad.
There's playgrounds though, I mean, a bathroom, sitting bathroom.
Yep, but with the splash pad, I was just thinking diapers and all that kind of stuff, anyway.
Yeah, no, that's
But
right.
that
When
factor
when
in
we
there,
bring our
that
kids
they
to a
get-
park just to run around and there happens to be a splash pad, my wife and I go, oh no, because our kids are just dressed in regular clothes. They didn't bring a bathing suit, and then they go and they get soaking wet, and we're like, uh-oh. But so that's just having kids, I guess. But so I mean, having a restroom that's an issue is like you need somewhere to like dry off or get changed or
Because
yeah.
there's nothing in that,
Yeah, I think.
we need to, anyway, that's a factor to consider.
And that may be a factor in general downtown, is you don't have
Absolutely.
facilities in the library or something here.
Or in gutters too far away.
I think it definitely, it looks like, it appears that that is the main feature to bring people into that park area right there. But it's actually very engaging, and you can make a nice sculpture out of something like that. So it can be sculptural and very engaging and interactive, as a splash pad. That's what I noticed at the Seattle Center, when I was there years ago. That people, families were walking through, adults were walking through, it became like an engaging experience rather than just a workout.
Really just so people look at it,
Yeah.
a little bit more than that.
As a water feature, it's possible you could tie in the fact that there's a river nearby and make it sort of rivery.
Good point.
I'm wondering about the cafe seating at the top.
Yes.
Is there some plan for developing electrical outlet access for food trucks in that general area? If you're just putting cafe seating there and you're not giving anyone really something, there's not a restaurant like right there, there's a couple up and down the street, but is there a plan for something like that, integrating a food truck area?
It's not something we talked about yet. It could be. I know there are definitely electrical lines running through the park, so adding an access point is something that we could discuss. I know we do have the bagel pits right next door there, so just providing kind of some space for even people who are just working downtown, come outside and have lunch. I always bring my lunch, because they just me, but our office is across the street from a park, so I can have a picnic every day. So this space could function that way too if the food trucks weren't really integrated into it, but then it's something we can talk about.
Yeah, food trucks are something, it's another one of those things that we always have to consider due to their popularity and the flexibility. So it would depend in terms of finalizing the plans on this, ultimately, you know, what the city's objectives and goals are for that, to activate that area.
I'd like to just add, I mean, talking about bringing electricity for food trucks. Speaking of electricity, and put it out there for whoever wants to ponder the thought. About 18 months ago, 20 months ago, I bought a new car, a hybrid, and it's not a plug-in hybrid. And it's still getting 55, 65 miles per gallon in decent weather. And plug-ins are all the rage now. You know, everybody assumes they have a plug-in, they have the old traditional hybrid that charges itself. But we don't have any charging options in the city of Plattsburgh. Market 32 outside the city, I think, is free. I'm not sure about the ones at the local mall.
You have to go all the way out to the mall by the highway.
I doubt those are free.
Well, those are, I think, just Tesla spots.
And the Market 32 does have the hybrid plugins.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're free.
Oh, okay.
2 hour limit, but I'm thinking the Tesla one was charged on the standard plug-in. That's how I use Tesla.
But you're saying your point is there's really nothing.
Nothing in the city. And I'm thinking that would actually be a lot of, that would be a draw, actually. I think a lot of people.
It can be a huge draw.
I mean, I have a hybrid now, but I was thinking my next vehicle will be the plug-in, only because if there were more plug-in options there, I was like, hey, I'm gonna go there, we can plug the car in for a couple hours, and, you know, it's only across
You
the
can
road.
check out the park where the car charges.
Yeah. You know, I said I'm getting 55 to 65 miles per gallon in 3 seasons that are good. I'm hearing that these plug-in people are getting 125, 135 miles per gallon. So, and I'm seeing more and more of them even around here, right, in City of Plattsburgh now, so I think I'm the last one that's got the northern hybrid that just, you know, you want to plug in everybody else, I see plug in.
Well, you know, it's interesting, that technology is getting so, with respect to hybrids, just as a quick aside, I had a rental car, I was doing work out in Western New York last week, and it took me like 3 days to realize I even had a hybrid. Because I said, this SUV just got me 45 miles a gallon, what's going on? That's how it was a hybrid. I'm sorry, there was other questions here. Did you have a question, ma'am?
Yes, I'm probably the Debbie Downer at every meeting I ever go to, but,
Welcome, Debbie.
this is beautiful, it's gorgeous and all, but I think maybe we're all forgetting what's around this. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, when the bars let loose, you're gonna have issues. So, I mean, are there gonna be like increased patrols? I mean, is something, otherwise,
Well, good lighting.
I'm not blaming it on the college students, I'm not
Right.
blaming it on anybody in specific or in general. But I mean, it's true, when they let out, they're gonna wanna get mischievous. It's a fact of life.
Yeah.
So,
I'm part of my point.
that's something to think
Okay.
about, maybe.
No, that's a good point. That's something we can discuss with, I think, law enforcement and try and address with lighting. I don't want to necessarily create I mean, we're trying to create nice things.
Positive,
We're trying to create positive things.
Exactly.
And, you know, we always hate it where we're like, okay, well, we don't want skateboarders, so we're gonna have
That's
these metal
a big issue.
spikes on the railing, so, and, you know, we're gonna have metal spikes on all horizontal, so we don't have people sleeping in the parking. We have to find a nice balance, but that's a good point. We don't want to create a place that's going to attract a nuisance or
You know,
attract trouble.
Right.
And you'll-
There are a lot of skateboarders down there.
No.
and, there's a problem even in the parking lot near the river walk, at the end of
Well-
Turkey Street. There's unfortunately.
We've, your point's really well taken, and we were talking about how we consider, things that are maintenance friendly. We like to have sites, and we need them, so sight lines are good, so you can have it videoed and whatnot. And we have put, parks in a lot more troubled areas than this. And you might eventually have kids out there in the beginning, but after 6 months or a year, it becomes old hat. They don't tag it or do anything. Those kids get out there raising mischief. It gets under control normally in about a 12-month period.
Security cameras probably, not hidden ones, but obvious.
Obvious. No, but we have them. We try to make sure the sight lines they're obvious and you can see them, and you make the signs, but you also have to back it up.
Yeah.
You have to have stuff going to the city with respect to the feeds and stuff for the police department.
Yeah, as we start to introduce, these new lighting, it could be light bulbs that have security cameras built right into them. And I think, as we improve the space, make it more attractive, add more lighting to it, there is more positive activity that tends to help deter some of the negative activity as well.
Yeah, that's true.
All good points to consider.
You're right.
That's true.
Speak with what you said though, I don't remember the last time I took count, but there's many more drinking establishments in this tiny little area than one would expect. I think I was over 20 or 23 the last time I counted. That includes restaurants which are alcohol or taverns.
Yeah, no, your point is well taken, and I think what we look at is, as Michael touched on and Emily, activating the area, getting more people in that area is oftentimes the best deterrent. And I think there's a newness to it, and there may be some activity in the beginning, but it does wane. And everyone modifies their patrols and reviews the video, and you have to be vigilant on it in the very beginning to establish a precedent.
Because this is a beautiful idea. I've lived here almost all my life, and to have something like this would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Don't want anything to happen, but, you have to be realistic at the same time.
Well, I think the thing that's, and Emily tried to touch on, I think, really in this piece here, is it's activated for many different groups. There's a lot of different things there. There's a place you can meet a friend for a cup of coffee or something on Margaret Street. There's the water feature. There's statues. There's other places, benches, areas for reflection, depending on what your level of interest is. And actually, the sides of those walls are pretty cool if you had it activated with murals or something.
Yeah, and I'd like to give, we did some focus groups with middle school students, and I'd like to give them credit in all of this, that this is something they want to see, right? Like, they want to funkify it, and you're a block away from the middle school. You're also half a block away from our new community outreach office, which is a nice added thing in downtown, that we've got, got a police officer who's walking that beat all the time, and we've got middle schoolers with skateboards who want this. They want the cool artwork, and they want to have places to gather. They want fun places to hang out. So I think that was really affirming when we did some of those projects too. Hopefully they're not the ones out there at 2 o'clock in the morning.
One of the things that I, thinking about groups of people, and I think sometimes when I travel places, I go with a group of people. And to have some seating, not just at the cafe area, that is more like a group of people can.
Okay.
I see a lot of these benches just facing artwork. I know this isn't the end sketch by any means, but I think we need like little hubs.
It's a little bit more of like a casual conversation.
Yeah, and I think about that in other parks where I go to, where there's some, benches that are facing each other, right? Yeah, little hubs.
That's a good point.
So I'm curious, have you thought of recycling bins? Because you were talking about the transformers being needed. Have you thought about a campaign for recycling bins?
So they're not, my thought was to put that like a trash and recycling at the bottom and at the top, like near the bike racks, just out of convenience, but We've done some that have really colorful side panels, but they're, we got them from a company where you can get custom ones, you can submit custom artwork, or it could be something that's a later project, where if we just have a material that kind of lends itself toward, yeah, you can paint on this reasonably and it will hold up, maybe that's another project for a future phase. But I think thinking about them as more than just your typical black trash can on the sidewalk is, especially for this area, you know, tying into the arts corridor, we've got the Strand just up the street, and really continuing that, making it a colorful, welcoming space. Make sure we consider everything. We could have really creative bike racks too.
That was my other question. So the first one was recycling bins, like painted or recycling bins to look like sculptures, so that people are engaged in the process of keeping plastic in the community of Pepper County. And also bike racks to make people feel like they're home. So, you know, in case the Church Street idea does go through, then people will feel like, you know, they don't have to leave Plattsburgh, they can bring family and friends here from different states and just stay engaged in their own community like they do in places like Portland, Oregon, and Montreal.
Well, you know what's interesting.
This has a nice infrastructure for that look, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times, like I saw it on Ithaca recently, their commons, and you know, it's cool because they got the recycle and the trash, but it's all solar powered, and it does a trash compactor right there. So there's like there's an issue about being environmentally responsible and sustainable right there, and there's a message in that to anyone that would use it.
Yeah, I think that would change the attitude of, you know, younger people, especially.
That's who we need to reach.
You know, teens are they're gonna be involved for a second, then there's some trashy ways. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I think going along the same lines as moving over against the wall side, and for this gentleman as well, with bringing more youth to the area, with all the development going on in this area as well as the riverfront improvement, is there going to be enough of a sidewalk and bike path for them to accommodate that? What are we losing for these kids to gain that access? Or gaining in the alternative?
That's a good question. I mean, we're trying to get bike path access along from like Margaret down Bridge Street and across the bridge. Where it connects to beyond that point, I'm not exactly sure right now. That's at least our focus from within the confines of the areas we're allowed to look at right now. That's a good question, is connecting, how do we get people?
Because it's so narrow to begin
Right.
with, and then you've got trucks double parking on there for doing their deliveries or whatnot.
Where
during the day.
do you see most of the bike activity outside Clay? From the outer neighborhoods coming into downtown, where do you see the
I
most?
see a lot of bike activity, Maui North is just like right there. I see a lot of bike activity coming down City Hall Place, well, I guess this is right out here. City Hall Place going straight down Durkee Street on that right-hand side. There's also a bike path, not on, I don't think it's on Durkee Street, but on City Hall Place, there's another one across the street.
Right.
I'm just looking at this and I think it's wonderful. However, I also, you know, we're talking about bringing kids with them, you know, on their skateboards, on their bicycles, whatnot, which is wonderful. They should be doing that. But where are they gonna ride them?
Well, it would be great to get the connector to get up to Stafford, get it that far, that would be awesome. Which is, you know, going up to Stafford a lot, because a lot of kids do commute to middle school, Stafford for middle school.
And I mentioned earlier that I'm not a kayaker, I'm a walking bike. I won't ride in the bike lanes anywhere in downtown because the danger of having a car door fly open in front of me, it's just, I've never been able to wrap my head around the idea how we ended up with these kind of bike lanes that we have that put a car right in the path of the bike. It doesn't make sense to me as a biker.
Can you elaborate on the bike path, the possibility of bikes? Are they gonna be charged to the public to help bring in money to the city?
We haven't gotten into that at all. So our work was just in trying to provide safe access for bicycles. So the standard, whether or not it's necessarily comfortable, as you mentioned, is to have, if you have parallel parking, then you have about a 5-foot bike lane next to that. We don't always have a lot of right-of-way to work with to create alternatives for that. We did just do a concept in the city of Watertown, where we were able to propose converting the street to a parking only on one side to give us, and then a one-way street, give us more room to work with. We were able to create a separated bike lane. So we created a buffer between the actual vehicle traffic and where the bikes would ride. But we don't always have that luxury. And then in terms of the access points beyond that, getting into any of the rentals or anything that hasn't been something that we've been considering.
We're not there yet.
And I've always thought that's kind of a good idea for small towns that are developing. I'm just relating that to, you know, when I lived out west, I visited Portland, Oregon a lot, and I like how their community was, okay, I'm going around the corner to go shopping, have coffee, I could pick up a bike and pay and ride, and they just felt embedded in the community.
They do have that in Saratoga Springs, sponsored by, you know, sometimes
CBTC.
The hospital.
like the bus company also provides these bike access, basically bike rental areas, and somewhat sponsored by the local hospitals. They're encouraging people to be healthy, so they're painted in the matching colors. But it's a great option. We've seen them be very popular.
Well, they're getting they really are getting popular, and if you also look at trying to attract people from the waterfront, you know, the folks that are stopping a boat coming uptown, they might want to drive around, ride around a little bit, it gives them an option.
One quick thing is, are you familiar with the JCEO's food bank that happens there regularly? So you've been?
Yes.
Okay.
Bruce is on the LPC.
Just have a few comments I want to make real quick.
Sure.
Can speak a few different things. Going off what this gentleman just said about biking in Plattsburgh, I'm also a cyclist. I bike to work every single day, all year long. One of the hurdles that I find most often is biking on busier streets without bike lanes. Now, I know that maybe a bike lane on Cornelia all the way down isn't a priority, but what about like Margaret and Durkee Bridge, those kind of streets to see most of the access or most of the usage, I think, by bikes. And also, I think there was a couple slides and also some stuff that I've read before about the Saranac River Trail being extended and having bike access from like there, over the river, onto Durkee Street, and then up here. And I know, like, for me, I would say that's a priority. It's, you know, and it would also create a more accessible in terms of walking, biking downtown. Just, you know, throwing it out there. Also, if I may, there was also a slide on sidewalk cafes that I think you guys were looking for comments about whether or not it was something that the city or the people would want to see. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think in particular we're looking at Margaret Street and saying, you know, there's a couple different things we can do here. We already have some pretty wide sidewalks in some areas, some nice street trees. You know, would you like to see more sidewalk cafes? Understanding that that typically takes away from the on-street parking.
Right.
Which is a...
Yep, yeah, exactly. Right. And there's pros and cons to both, obviously, but you know, it is a very popular thing. It's becoming even more popular. A lot of larger cities do a lot of that stuff. And I can only speak for myself. You know, I don't walk much. I mostly bike and walk. I live in the city. I have that benefit. But I also manage a business that has a parklet, or at least it will once I build it. And it's a big draw. So having more access to parklets, I think, would be a great thing. If it can be
parklets.
Or I guess sidewalk cafes.
Right.
Either one would, you know, be great.
Okay.
Actually, something that stands out to me is that they do seem very popular, and it seems like people do support them generally. And they do take away parking as they're built, but it seems to be okay. I mean, is that true? You know, because I know that generally it's in front of a business, right? And generally taking away a parking space that's in front of a business is a negative, but in this case, it seems to be supported. Is it something that you think would be something that's supported being more formalized or not?
I can tell you
General
that,
consensus, I know it's not a parking meeting today, but.
of course.
We're not allowed to talk about parking.
Yeah, well, let's go.
But
Tell you
we're
that.
talking about parking.
Basically,
We're
I'm
talking
talking
about
about, it's basically talking about as a co-op just over here on Bridge Street. And
Right.
we put our park in the closest spot to us.
Okay.
And only one person I know has brought that to my attention in terms of complaint. Most people are like, this is awesome. And they get the wraps, they sit outside and they chill and they go out to work or whatever. So it seems to me that the majority of people prefer that as long as it's not excessive, I guess would be the word.
And if I could just comment on that too, I think like during the day, when you see people dining for lunch and whatnot, they're already in their respective business parking spots, so they're able to walk from where they work to those. I mean, I work downtown, and when I eat out, I mean, it takes me 5 minutes to walk from where, 10 tops, to walk from where I work to go and dine somewhere.
Nice.
And at nighttime, you have to consider too, most of those people that are at their jobs have gone home. So you've got people coming in and replacing those cars in those spots so that they can now get out of their car and walk to wherever those outdoor cafes are. There's a lot of people that do it both ways. I'm one of them. I enjoy eating my lunch outside during the summer, but I walk to it from where I work. If I come here after hours, a lot of times to have a margarita at the Pepper or whatever it is I'm planning to do, I just park my car somewhere downtown because now there's a vacant spot for me, and I'm able to walk over there and enjoy a drink or have a dinner.
The really nice thing is first of all, you got some real dining and drinking options right downtown, and there's a density to downtown, which a lot of places can't recreate. And everything is within a couple of minutes. It's a really nice feature of the town.
I'd like to elaborate on your comments about biking, just going back to safety for a minute. Any kind of downtown redevelopment. Road bike or mountain bike?
Road bike.
Okay, I've got both. And I've had a road bike more than the mountain, and I've come to appreciate the wide dirty tires of the mountain bike. However, I'm sure you've run into this. It's not so much a problem in the immediate downtown area, maybe you get a block or two out. When you get to the road grades, and they're vertical, on a road bike, when you got skinny little racing tires, beyond your racing bike, when your road grade is that wide, you grab your front tire and you start elbowing over the front of the handlebars. Fortunately, that does not happen to me, but many people I know. Not And then we had some grades that are actually going out left to right, which is great, because there's no way that your tire could ever get caught in those. Just throwing it out there for anybody in the room that may have.
Road grades perpendicular, let's make it.
So
No,
that's
thank
another
you.
consideration.
Never horizontal road grades, because not everybody has a big wide mountain tires. I got both just to say.
Okay. Well, it's good to know.
Another consideration
And I'm the
for,
rebel.
similar along those lines is the materials for the Riverwalk, the boardwalk. We've looked at it being potentially a bicycle connection as well. Not that we want, we want to be careful about where we're having bicycles and pedestrians sharing the space.
Yeah.
But we've tried to set aside at least a 10-foot wide main pathway and then kind of that overlook area being additional to that. But materials for that being bike friendly, something to bring out for discussion. So I've ridden across essentially boardwalks, and it's not that fun to be the whole time. Similar for paper, so sometimes it's not really an issue. Sometimes they feel smooth, sometimes they feel bumpy. If they don't want cobbles, that's helpful. But concrete's pretty smooth. So just anybody have any thoughts on materials for the boardwalk or other design features of that as well? The types of plantings. Is it a more natural planted feel? Is it a more formal feel? Is it urban? Is it a little more casual? Lighting styles, benches styles, any of that?
The one thing,
comments.
I will just interject for one moment. The one thing I was just going to say is Michael touched on in the beginning, the complexity and trying to tie in everything together. That's where the Saranac River Trail kind of ties in, because we don't want to do anything that is contrary or competes with that, because clearly we think that's important in terms of being a path along the Saranac River. Now, with that being said, I just added your point, sir. You were going to say something.
Oh, I wanted to go back to the waterfront.
Yes.
Slide that had the different paver designs.
The next one.
So I can ask the question, give a comment. Yeah. So I'm not a biker. I'm just a walker and a doer. I come to Plattsburgh, because I'm interested in the arts. I'm an artist and designer, gardener, and so my whole life is just based around creativity.
Mhm.
So I come to Plattsburgh because I like towns and cities, but it's not a place I would live. But if I was living in a town or a city, like, and I kind of relate this to Oregon, downtown Portland, Oregon, it has that feel, and I see the potential. And so that's why I'm commenting on the design a lot right now. So if I was a biker, I would want the pavers around that tree. Because I don't want to be bombarded by too much information visually as I'm riding a bike. And if I was walking, I would want the really large, wide pavers. And I think that would work for, just my opinion, would also work for, you know, if there's future plans for a farmer's market or a waterfront arts and crafts group that's out there. Because it's not going to detract from the easy attempts and things like that.
Sorry,
That actually struck me really well when I saw that. the wider pavers.
When you said if you were a walker, you'd prefer which, I didn't catch which was the
really wide, you know,
wide
geometric, you know, checker pattern, the grades.
the keyboard pattern?
Yeah. Yeah, the one,
Wide.
the top
Top row.
right, yeah, the second one. But it's also inviting. It's also inviting.
And I can say also, if I'm taking my bike down the boardwalk or down one of these paths, I'm not gonna be, you know, pedaling at full force down that path for a lot of reasons. So things that aren't necessarily smooth is the wrong word, but, you know, cobblestones are obviously different, but when it comes to, you know, like as you said, on the boardwalk maybe, but maybe the wider stones, not that big of a deal if you're not, you know, cooking down that road quickly. Even bikes will find it comforting to kind of leisurely stroll down something like that.
Okay. Any thoughts on integrating, like some of these images have real patterns to the pavement, and some of it's really, you know, not so busy. Any opinions either way on, like the upper right one's got, you know, these arcs and half circles through it. The one in the top center is a mix of pavers, and then that's actually porous concrete that surrounds it. So stormwater drains through it. And then, you know, some of the others are just wider concrete pavers, or wood, you know.
And the far upper right goes really well with the one that I was talking about.
What's that, sir?
The far upper right one.
Okay.
Just visually goes really well with the wide square rectangular pattern, the grades. Because I don't think it takes away from the environment. You know, if you're gonna have like environmental sculptures, contemporary modern sculptures, things like benches that are designed as well to look very futuristic and fit into the environment. Those colors don't, and those designs don't detract from plants, trees, or people walking or bikers,
Right.
which are not.
The upper right corner one does really reflect like the flow of the water.
Right.
That really, and I think that was very complimentary to your experience walking along the river. So I like the one that's mismatched, like the patchwork of, it's really flowing water too, but it may be more distracting than the experience of the flowing water.
Thanks.
I would second what you were saying about the pattern in the walkways mimicking sort of the flow of the river and bringing that up into the materials. Also, having some of the in-ground lighting, the second one to the right on the top, and some of like under the bench lighting to illuminate some of those pathways.
Just as a person, the one on the far right upper, I would think in the winter would be difficult when you get snow on it, because it would blend in with the snow and the ice, whereas the one that is on the top, second in, the gray one, would be much easier for people to navigate, you know, and it would be more visible in the winter.
How about the colors? I just think the shapes of it.
Yeah, I like the shapes and stuff in it too, but I'm also trying to think of, you know, if I was walking along this in the middle of winter, you know, and there's snow and ice, which one would I prefer to walk on? And even though I like that design, you know, I could use a slightly darker pattern that might, you know, be more reflective and maybe
It's going to absorb some more heat.
better, and you can see it better or something, you know what I mean?
Well, there's a couple of elements there, because Emily touched on the one, that the middle on the top has actually got porous asphalt, correct?
Porous concrete.
Porous concrete. So what that does is that allows every time there's a freeze thaw, the thaw goes right through it. And so ultimately, it is not going to collect the water, it's going to go through it. It is a lot less tripping hazards on that. That's something that we've seen with a lot of, we've had some real success with it. The one just immediately right of that looks smooth, and it actually has kind of a look that mimics the one to the right a little bit. You just can't see it with the lighting. That's actually got a fairly rough coefficient of friction on it. So
it's a little bit approaching like the edges of a swimming pool where you have that non.
that's it. There's a little bit of grit on it.
It's actually the pedestrian bridge that we mentioned. That's the surface of the pedestrian bridge. It's got plantings and
Yeah.
benches on it.
It's just got enough grit on it, and it's got enough of a pitch, so every time you get a freeze thaw, it isn't porous concrete, but it's gonna follow the grade and it'll run off.
How does it work with ice? I mean, you had such an icy winter. How did it work with them this past winter? And ice, I mean, it's snow removal, but now we're dealing with ice removal.
I don't know if they had any issues. I mean, it's pitched so that it drains, and I think they do keep it, they don't plow it, do they?
They can. That's actually, and they right now are keeping it closed for 3 months a year.
Okay.
They're keeping it closed from after Santa shows up. And after they do New Year's, they keep it closed till the 1st of April, January, February, March.
I think the Hudson stays open, so maybe we can ask them about
It will become open once they get their train station stuff settled, but right now it's still
Well, I guess it's
3/4 a year.
Something else to consider in wintertime too is that if the city uses salt on any of the sidewalks they maintain, you can have to use a material that's resistant to
Yeah.
anything like this.
Oh, degradation, of course. I mean, if, like, say you use porous concrete or porous asphalt, you can't use sand, because that will fill every blind.
Fills up the whole.
It's no longer porous.
But that gets back into the question that occurred about quite a while ago about operations and maintenance. Those things have to be, there have to be directives that are included with the completed construction.
So out of the top pavers or walkways, the top five, which one is actually the safest for the public? I'm just curious. I don't know much about materials like that. But I like the look of now that I look at the last one that you were talking about, and I look at the one to the left of it, that's open enough, but not too sophisticated enough for this improvement, design improvement. And it feels like it's country and small town, and wanting to improve a little bit,
Yeah,
and
we
not
do.
be way out there.
Which one are you
So it feels
referring to,
open.
sir?
The bridge.
The last
Oh.
one, but the one to the left of the last one.
Yeah,
It's
that's.
very open, and I think it can sustain the design where you were talking about having low-cut trees, everything being exposed. That's a really nice look. I'm just curious, out of the five on the top, which one is actually the safest for the public?
Safest in terms of just public safety or slipping and falling
Yeah, things
or?
like that, yeah.
Well,
I mean, for instance, if there was a arts and crafts fair out there on Waterfront, or a small art, some kind of art entertainment, poetry reading, or performance art, something like that for the public. How safe
Well,
what is the safest one up there?
I was, if I could just, I'll respond to this one. This is one I've talked to about for about 10 years. So this is the bridge in Amsterdam. This is the
If he
Mohawk.
starts talking about the threat of mines, cut him off.
No, it's and the everything you mentioned there in terms of they have yoga classes, they have concerts, they have weddings on that bridge. They do a myriad of things, and it was designed by our design team specifically so it would be maintenance friendly and sustainable and hardy. It's not a lot. There's not a great deal of complexity there. We created a platform for artwork and plants and trees, and just natural beauty, and there's historic elements in it and all these sorts of things. But I would say from a maintenance perspective, during the winter and those sorts of things, it's probably the easiest. It's got gathering nodes. I know in our plans we have areas that are a little wider so people can gather. That's exactly what this has. You know, from my perspective, it's been a home run, and this is actually, in terms of community usage, it's been about 6 times what was originally projected. City of Amsterdam's about the same size as Plattsburgh. In the first year of operation, that had 300,000 people come to it.
I think each one of them is a little bit different. The upper left is in New York City.
That's
in
Battery Bosque, yeah. Battery Park.
The top center one is in Watkins Glen State Park, so that we just completed last year. I think they do actually clear that part in the winter still.
Yeah, it's open. That's open 12 months a year. I think that's part of the reason why they put the porous concrete, just so it's, you know, less slip trips and fall hazards. However, there's a little bit of a cost bump on that.
Yeah,
And are
it's
those
not that
meeting-
bad.
And are those meeting areas right there, benches? To the right of the last, the second one.
It's like
from
this,
the
yeah, so
right,
you see the gray concrete that's kind of raised is a planter, and then
Like right
that's the
there?
bench right there.
There's
That's
a
the
bench,
bench.
yeah.
So several people can have like outdoor meetings there, things like
Yeah,
that.
it's,
Oh, goodness, yeah.
It's a decent, it's not like you can bring maybe fit your whole family on that bench, you can fit a couple people sitting on that.
I'm just talking
But-
about the kind of casual meetings.
Yes.
No, but
Like cafe
but they
outside.
do have nodes of gathering areas
Yeah, there
where
are
they've
some
had
larger
weddings,
areas.
and they actually use that area for art shows.
Okay.
That everyone will set up their tents and people just walk down. That's where they do trick or treating, and all the businesses have little kiosks along it. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think that
but-
it has a very aesthetic,
But the one-
simple look, but also is public safety.
I think it's also a simple elegance to it. It really is. And the thing I would say though is that the reason that's successful is all about the community's programming of it. It's all grassroots. I mean, we can help get you to a point, but ultimately the community has to take ownership.
Anyone else who hasn't gotten a chance to speak? Want to make sure we give everyone a chance here. Some of you have been dominating the conversation. No names.
Any closing thoughts on the street, like sidewalk design elements? I know there's some areas downtown have pavers, some it's just concrete sidewalk. Any preferences for designs moving forward and the types of lighting? We have, the historic style, we mentioned maybe the existing ones might not be the most energy efficient, we could do a masking style that is. There's also the light poles along Dock Street are very waterfront specific, and is that something that's, just appropriate for the waterfront, or we want to keep the downtown area kind of looking downtown? Just any thoughts on designs for the streets themselves? Do you want to still, try to find places for benches along the sidewalk, or, is that too much of a conflict between the maintenance again? Any ideas? Or we'll just, that could be something that we, can test out options for too, and maybe post for online voting afterward, if you think that's a good way to go about it.
I mean, if you're talking about sidewalks all over downtown, or just those key streets that you mentioned are high priority?
Well, we'd be starting with the key streets, but, there's a chance that that kind of sets the precedent for what might follow. So, not saying that it has to, but it could.
I mean, concrete always seems like the most cost efficient, but maybe like a colored concrete with a pattern, or maybe there's like a little plaque or something every so often, so it's,
Just to break it up.
tip or like some, I don't know, something that's cohesive around all downtown.
We do have a lot of historic buildings and historic locations, so it would be a way to tie that in the future. Something, we often do too is we'll have the first 2 to 3 feet from the curb toward the sidewalk be brick pavers, and then maybe a 5 or 6 foot sidewalk. That's a look that people like. I think that it is in a few locations, but not consistently downtown, so.
So So that type of, thing you're talking about, that the structural look and design for the streets are gonna be consistent?
It could be. It's kind of the, question that's out there is, should it be, or does it feel like, this is kind of part of a certain district, we want this to be on, Margaret Street, for example, but on Durkee Street, we really want something different. Up for consideration. It is also a historic district too, if that, plays into your thinking at all.
I can see areas around, I'm not familiar with the streets that well. I can visualize them, but, and I see them because I'm not downtown all the time. Around the co-op, whatever street that is, where Lake City Brewery used to be, going up that street, I think that area could be great for on bikes. Like just a walking area, no driving at all. If I come downtown a lot, 2 times a week as I teach here, but also I come here because I live in the country, and when I come to Plattsburgh, it's my city. And I feel like I'm on vacation. So I don't have a problem with, just stopping everything and taking my time and saying, okay, I'm gonna walk around, I'm gonna shop, I'm gonna go to the co-op, I'm gonna go to here and here and here, and that's what I enjoy when I have time off. So I wouldn't have, for me personally, I wouldn't have a problem just parking and walking. Because it has its features here that I enjoy, and it has the shops.
Yeah.
I just wish there were more shops.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish there were more shops and interesting places like high-end consignment shops, because I'm sort of like a consignment and thrift shop junkie as an artist. That's the reason why I go to Burlington a lot. I go to Burlington a lot because I can go along Pine Street and tackle all these different shops that have something different. So I'm always shopping for treasures. I'm not shopping for what I want. I'm shopping for an idea of what I want, and if I see it, I'm gonna buy it. So my time away from everything I do is just going to small towns and that are redone, and I look for shops, basically.
Treasure.
Yeah, definitely. And I can see this becoming, sort of like that kind of town.
One
Better, actually.
sort of theme that we've been playing around with is the idea of, from a sidewalk design standpoint, is you have the main body of the sidewalk being like basically concrete or covered concrete. But then you have a more decorative side to it, which is out toward the curb, which is, 3 or 4 feet of decorative brick paving. And that's where we get a little bit fancier with planting street trees and some bike racks, and you have more of your amenities and that sort. Is there anywhere in the downtown where, having this concrete sidewalk and then brick wouldn't really work for whatever reason, from just, you feel like we shouldn't do something like that, or is that, would we be able to do something like that pretty consistently, do you think? Just asking everybody in general, so.
I think it would be nice to have it fairly consistent, and then using some of the other marketing features that they've been talking about to sort of designate other areas or different districts within the city. Also having aging parents who are still mobile but, have some mobility issues, having benches, whether it's
Pretty regularly,
so that we can be, I live right downtown, so I'm frequently here, and I walk, so parking's not an issue for me. But if I can bring my parents with me, having places where they can sit and still enjoy walking downtown.
Okay.
You had mentioned Clinton Street. Was there any points of selection of things on Clinton Street where you're concerned about how living is?
Hadn't thought about it too much. It just kind of seems like we've seen in other cities where you have a street where maybe not every storefront is occupied, and just making some sidewalk and lighting upgrades really, suddenly all the shops are
Helps
full.
to spur some people moving in and more activity. People more likely to be like, hey, I want to walk down the street because it's nicer now, and then they start to
More
frequent
foot
the
traffic
shops.
supports the businesses,
Right.
and then it kind of goes from there. But it does also seem like it's a fairly well contained street. In terms of lighting could be its own thing, or it could just
In your
continue.
experience, what has worked the best and made the area flourish, having consistent lighting and sidewalk applications throughout areas? Or like, for instance, like Clinton Street should be its own thing and have its, maybe that would.
I think if you want people to feel comfortable,
That's a good question.
almost walking a loop or continuing to walk through downtown, having some consistency is good. It helps people feel like this is part of the same area. I don't feel like I'm gonna get lost if I go this way. We toyed around the idea of protection because it's so narrow. Could there be overhead lighting and they're like string lights or something you might see in downtown New York City alley or something. But it's a very different type of street, so it kind of lends itself to that. And it's not, you don't have storefronts opening onto it necessarily, where you might want, the regular sidewalk for those types of areas.
So have you, I guess, talked about the plantership? It's something in the survey that I got, I was listing planters.
Okay.
And what's the safety involved around that? I mean, do you have any experience in how that works in other cities and towns?
In terms of safety of
Just the
planters?
safety around planters, I'm not talking about terracotta, but they're kind of like metal or something.
A lot of times our planters oftentimes are concrete,
Okay.
a lot of times, so
I've
I
seen
mean,
some elaborate.
in terms,
planters.
so in terms of safety, I don't think we've gotten into any detail on that, have we, Emily? Normally, our planters are of such a weight, safety isn't a factor, unless someone like runs into it or bicycles into it or something.
Well, I was thinking like at night, or if someone can't see very well, and you try to infuse planters as an aesthetic design or sculpture on
More
the
like a
street.
tripping hazard, or?
Things like that, or someone has a walker, they're walking by, oh, I didn't see it because it looks like the light post.
Well,
And
actually,
they look at the light post, they don't look at the bottom part.
Right.
no, but
That's
if
well designed.
you're making a good point. It kind of makes the argument for what we had for the Amsterdam Bridge, because it was a very wide berth, and the entire sides, on both sides, is planters. They're built in, but it's all planters, and it's,
And within some of those in particular, there are actually recessed lights into the wall of the planter.
yeah, so there's
There.
uplighting and stuff on the trees. But that's all built into the hardscaping. So they're not standalones.
I think if we
But you
were-
can do it either way.
I think if we were to introduce, like a raised planter or something, even, ground level planters on the street, we'd be making sure that we also have consistent lighting so that it is well lit.
Absolutely.
You see the changes in pavements or materials.
Yeah, one thing that's really common for us is like, we're talking about the lights and whatnot, but a lot of times we'll have a light wash over the entire walking area, so it improves the visibility. A lot of times our walkways and stuff are easier to walk and more clearly defined in terms of the walking path at night than during the day.
Business lights, so if you have a lot of storefronts and if they do keep the front windows lit in the evenings, it does help
Yeah.
additional lighting for safety as well.
Yeah, I think
I'm saying
that,
everybody needs their lights on all night, but.
I think the idea of, the, whatever you call them, the planters being part of the lamps, the lights outside will keep the cost down as far as design elements.
That's a
So not
possibility.
separate.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we always do, the thing is with a project like this, scope can't creep. The money's the money. And so we have to design up to that, and it can't exceed it. So we're always looking at ways to be innovative to stretch a dollar as far as possible in terms of design and construction.
Any additional comments or questions before we adjourn? And we will make sure that, a copy of this gets posted on the
Yep.
city
Yes.
GRI page. Everybody can
Oh,
actually
wait.
review it or share with your friends if they weren't able to make it tonight. And as we move forward on, updating some designs,
Oh, yeah, I'll go back, don't worry.
we'll look for ways that we can get additional feedback on, we'll have some draft street designs as we move forward and try to get your thoughts.
Yeah, please stay active on this, because this is really where the rubber hits the road for us, and we'd like to get to work on some of these projects.
Yes. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes.